Today we're going to start chapter 9 and we're going to talk about cellular respiration. Now cellular respiration typically occurs in the mitochondria, so think back to when we talked about the cell parts and what exactly the mitochondria does. So let's take this in perspective. We've talked about photosynthesis and how energy is basically taken in from the sun and changed into or helped made into glucose. And glucose is the food that plants make. And in humans and other organisms that are heterotrophs, we don't make our own food. But we do have to get our food from someplace because we need energy, because every living cell needs energy. So some of the things that humans need energy for are contracting our muscles, making protein molecules by linking amino acids together, cell division to repair damaged tissue and to grow, so cells grow, active transport, perhaps transmitting nerve impulses throughout our body, and producing heat to keep internal temperature stable. Now these are all ways, and there's plenty of other ways, why our cells need energy in order to do its everyday stuff. Now the energy that we need comes from the food we eat. So we talked about digestion already, so think about the process. Now what I have for you here is a very shortened, very condensed digestion process. So think about your food being digested. It gets absorbed into the blood. The blood transports nutrients to the cells, and then the cells will take the nutrients that they do need. Now the main energy source is glucose, and this glucose must be broken down somehow in order to release the energy. So it's kind of cyclical. We have the photosynthesis is pretty cyclical. Now the process that breaks glucose down is cellular respiration. Now this is the process of several chemical reactions that break down nutrients into nutrient molecules in the living cells in order to release energy. Now at this point I want to make sure that you understand that cellular respiration is not breathing. They are two separate processes. Cellular respiration happens at a cellular level. And yes, one of the byproducts of cellular respiration is carbon dioxide. Cellular respiration and breathing are completely different. So please don't automatically assume that if something's going through cellular respiration that it's breathing. And that leads me to the next question here. And the next question that I have on the next slide is this. Plants both photosynthesize and go through cellular respiration. Now is this true or false? Think about what I just said and state your answer. Now if you said true, you are correct. Plants do photosynthesize, so they make their own food, and they need to break down that glucose somehow in order to get the energy that it needs in order to grow, to open its stoma, to do a variety of things that plants do. Now, energy, remember, is not created and it is not destroyed. It's transformed or it's transferred between things. So when we think of the energy that gets created, and I put that in quotations, the energy that is made inside of an organism, it truly isn't made out of thin air. It really is a transfer of energy. And this energy gets transferred to a molecule called ATP. Now, when cells break down food molecules, some of the energy is just automatically released as heat. This is seen in your body. If you were to take your temperature right after you ate, you'd probably notice an elevated temperature. Not by much, but it's slightly elevated, and that's because as your body breaks down the food, energy gets released, and it's as heat. The other remaining energy is actually stored temporarily in molecules of ATP. Now you're going to hear me say that ATP is energy. In essence, it is not. It is not a molecule of energy. However, ATP is a storage unit for energy. So when I say a molecule of energy or a molecule of ATP, I really mean that the ATP is actually storing that energy. So think of ATP as a currency, kind of like money. ATP delivers the energy wherever energy is needed inside of a cell. So it gets created in the mitochondria, but for various reasons we need energy. That ATP is there in order to kind of supply the energy that we need. So think of ATP as the currency, kind of a form of money inside the cell. So what really is ATP? Well, we've talked about nucleotides already. And typically, a nucleotide is a molecule that's made up of a sugar, a base, and a phosphate group. Well, this is part of ATP. The A of ATP is adenosine, and adenosine is a nucleotide. And then remember, the nucleotides have the sugar, the base, and a phosphate group. In this picture here, this is your adenosine. This is a monomer, so the nucleotides are monomers of nucleic acids. Now, ATP stands for adenosine triphosphate. While I'm not going to make you memorize the word adenosine triphosphate, I want you to recognize that ATP is a storage unit of energy, and that the P, this triphosphate, stands for 3 phosphates. So in essence, adenosine triphosphate is an adenosine with 2 extra energy storing phosphate groups. And if we were to take a picture, this is sort of what it's going to look like. Now, the energy is released in ATP when the bonds that hold the phosphate groups together are broken. So if we go back to this picture here, we have 2 extra phosphate groups in this section. We're actually going to remove one of these phosphate groups. When that bond breaks, it releases energy, and that's what supplies the body or the organism with energy. When that happens, when the bonds break there, that phosphate group, that one that gets released, is going to kind of go away, and then we're left with a molecule of ADP. And again, I'm not going to make you memorize what it stands for, but ADP stands for adenosine diphosphate, with the di meaning 2. So now we're left with 2 phosphates. Remember when I mentioned that ATP is kind of like a form of currency? Think of ATP as a wallet full of money. It's got tons of money waiting to be spent. ADP, on the other hand, is an empty wallet. It's waiting for money to be put back in. So while the ATP can spend it, ADP wants to take it back. This is a nice visual representation of that process where ATP has all the money. This is basically your storage unit for energy. So we have our adenosine. This is our nucleotide right here. We have the 3 phosphates. Now if that bond breaks off that 3rd phosphate, we're going to release tons of energy right here. And that phosphate group is transferred to another molecule. And it's a process called phosphorylation, and that is something that you would probably learn at a college level, college biology or ACE biology, let's say. Now, it's that phosphate group will then be restored back during one of those cycles or one of those phases in cellular respiration. Nothing that you have to really know, but that phosphate group can be attached back to another ADP to create the molecule of ATP. So know that this is a cycle. It gets spent and then it gets regenerated, spent and regenerated, just like a wallet full of money or an empty wallet. So if the currency type of scenario doesn't work for you, think of it as a rechargeable battery. This says high. I know it doesn't really say high right now, but this is supposed to say high. So think of ATP as a battery that is fully charged. Those fully charged iPhones in all your electronic devices. So we need it to be full in order to power all that cellular work. But as you use your stuff, that battery gets really low. And this is ADP, so all your energy is now spent. However, during the process of cellular respiration, the ADP can become charged again. So now it's going to be fully charged and it's going to carry that energy with it. So you have two analogies to kind of think of what ADP and ATP is like, your currency and your rechargeable battery.